Most people look at a backyard and see grass, weeds, and empty space. I look at that same space and ask one question. What's the first system that could start turning waste into something people actually buy? That's where most beginners get this wrong. They start with the animal they like most instead of the system that makes the most sense first. They chase the exciting setup before they build the useful one. That's how a backyard gets expensive fast. If I had one backyard, limited money, limited time, and no room for expensive mistakes, I wouldn't start by asking which animal looks the most exciting. I'd ask one question first. Which system gives me the cheapest start, the lowest legal risk, the least noise, the easiest product to sell, and the strongest connection to everything I might build later? That question changes the answer completely. If I had to start from zero with one backyard, I'd start with worm farming. I know, that's not the flashy answer. It's not the animal most people imagine when they think about backyard income. But that's exactly why it's the smartest first move. Worms are quiet, cheap, legal in more places, easy to hide, easy to scale, and they turn waste into something gardeners already pay for. And the best part is this. Worm farming doesn't trap you in one business. It becomes the foundation for the next system. Stay with this to the end, because I'm going to show you why I'd start with worms, how I'd build the first 90 days, when I'd add chickens or quail, what I'd avoid early, and how the first small bin can become the foundation of a backyard income stack. This is the difference between owning animals and building a system. The first rule is simple. Your first backyard income system should be boring on purpose. That sounds strange, but boring is exactly what you want at the beginning. You don't want loud. You don't want expensive. You don't want complicated infrastructure. You don't want an animal that forces you to solve fencing, predators, neighbors, zoning, water, feed bills, housing, processing, and buyers all at the same time. That's how beginners get buried. The first system should prove that the backyard can produce something people will buy without forcing you to rebuild your whole property around it. Worm farming passes that test better than anything else. A basic worm bin can start with a plastic tote, shredded cardboard or paper, food scraps, moisture control, and a pound of red wigglers. Depending on what you already have, the setup can land around $30 to $75. It can fit in a garage, a basement, a shed, under a utility sink, or in a shaded outdoor corner. There's no crowing, no honking, no smell if it's managed correctly, no predator issue like poultry, no large feed bill, no fence, no pond, no milking routine, no hatchery order, no barn. That matters because the first backyard system isn't just about income. It's about reducing friction. The lower the friction, the easier it is to keep going long enough to learn the business. Worms create 3 products. The first is worm casting. Gardeners buy them because they improve soil structure, water retention, and plant growth. Castings can sell for $1 to $3 per pound in bulk, or $25 to $50 for a 25-pound bag at retail, depending on the local market and packaging. The second product is live worms. Red wigglers can sell for $20 to $40 per pound to composters, gardeners, schools, homesteaders, and other worm growers. Night crawlers can also tap into the fishing bait market. The third product is worm tea, a liquid fertilizer made from castings. This needs to be handled carefully and marketed honestly, but when done properly, it gives gardeners another product to buy from the same system. That's why worms are powerful. They don't just make one product, they create a small product ladder. A beginner can start with castings, then sell live worms, then create soil blends, then build a local garden customer base, then use the waste and manure from future animals to feed the worm system. That's how the first setup becomes the root system for the rest of the backyard. Once that root system is working, the next question becomes much easier. You're no longer asking, what animal should I buy? You're asking, what system can use what I already have and create the next product people will buy? That's why chickens and quail come after the worms, not before them. Now compare that to starting with chickens. Chickens are great, I'd add them later. But I wouldn't make them my first move in a backyard income build unless I already knew my local rules, my neighbors were comfortable, and I had a clear egg market. Chickens bring immediate problems worms don't bring. They need a coop, they need predator protection, they need feed, they need space. They can attract rodents if feed is stored poorly. Hens are quieter than roosters, but they still make noise. In some areas, they're restricted. And if your egg price is too low, feed cost eats the margin quickly. That doesn't make chickens bad. It means they're not always the cleanest first step. A lot of people start with chickens because eggs feel familiar, but familiarity doesn't automatically mean profit. If 25 hens produce around 10 dozen eggs per week, and those eggs sell for $5 to $8 per dozen, the revenue can look good. But feed, bedding, housing, losses, time, and local pricing still matter. Worms let you learn selling before you add animals that eat every day. That's the key. The first system should teach you how to package, price, talk to buyers, and deliver a product. Worm farming does that without a feed bill chasing you every morning. The second rule is that the first system should create value from waste. This is where worms become more than a small side hustle. Every household creates organic waste: vegetable scraps, coffee grounds, eggshells, cardboard, paper, garden trimming, leaves, plant waste. Most people throw those materials away or compost them slowly. Worms turn them into a sellable soil product. That changes how you see the backyard. A banana peel is no longer trash. Cardboard is no longer just recycling. Fallen leaves are no longer yard cleanup. Those materials become inputs, and once you add other systems, the value gets stronger. Chicken manure can be composted and used carefully with worms. Rabbit manure can feed worm systems directly when managed properly. Duck bedding can go into compost before becoming worm feed. Garden waste becomes worm feed. Worm castings go back into garden beds. The garden produces more scraps. The cycle tightens. That's why I'd start with worms before I started with the louder animals. Worms teach the backyard to stop wasting input, and in a small backyard, waste control is profit control. The third rule is that your first product should be easy to explain. Worm castings are easy to explain to gardeners. You don't need to convince them that soil matters. They already know it. You don't need to teach them how to eat rabbit. You don't need to explain why quail eggs are worth more. You don't need to sell them on duck eggs if they've never baked with them. You don't need to ask them to understand an aquaponics system. You can say this simply: these are worm castings. Add them to your garden soil, seed starting mix, raised beds, or container plants. That's a clean first product. The easiest early buyers aren't random strangers. They're gardeners, container growers, raised bed owners, houseplant people, small market gardeners, composters, fishing bait buyers, schools, local growers, even neighbors who already spend money on potting soil. The first goal isn't to become a huge worm farm. The first goal is to prove that someone near you will pay for a backyard-produced input. That proof matters more than the first sale itself, because once one person buys, you can ask what they want next. More casting, live worms, a small bag size, a larger bag, a potting mix, a monthly refill, a garden bundle. That's how a backyard business starts to listen to the market. Now here's how I'd build the first 90 days. In the first week, I'd build one simple worm bin, not 10 bins, not a full shed, not a giant operation. One bin. I'd start small because the first month is about learning the system. Moisture, bedding, temperature, food amount, and smell control. Worms don't need complicated care, but they do need balance. Too wet and the bin turns sour. Too dry and the worms suffer. Too much food and the bin smells. Too little bedding and the system gets dense and messy. The main mistake is overfeeding. That mistake kills more worm bins than almost anything else. Feed only what the worms can process in 2 to 3 days. Keep bedding fluffy. Keep moisture like a wrung-out sponge. Keep the bin shaded and protected from extreme temperatures. Don't treat it like a garbage can. Treat it like livestock, because that's what it is. Small livestock in a box. In weeks 2 through 4, I'd focus on consistency, not selling. This is where a lot of people rush. They want income immediately, so they start talking about sales before the system is stable. I'd rather spend the first few weeks making sure the worms are healthy, the bin smells earthy, and the feed rhythm is predictable. In month 2, I'd test demand before scaling. This is where the business begins. I'd offer small bags of castings first, not giant bags. Small, easy-to-buy sizes, 5-pound bags, 10-pound bags, simple labels, clear instructions, local pickup. I'd post in local gardening groups, neighborhood boards, marketplace listings, and anywhere plant people gather. The message would be simple: locally produced worm castings for raised beds, containers, and houseplants. That's enough to test interest. I wouldn't spend money on fancy packaging yet. I wouldn't build a website yet. I wouldn't order thousands of bags. I'd sell the simplest version of the product and watch what people ask for. If they ask for larger bags, that tells me something. If they ask for live worms, that tells me something. If they ask whether it works for houseplants, that tells me something. If they ask about potting mix, that tells me where to go next. The market tells you what to build. In month 3, I'd decide whether to add the next system. This is where most people get impatient. They start one thing, then immediately add chickens, quail, rabbits, bees, and ducks before the first system is even stable. That's how a backyard turns into stress. I'd add the next system only when the worm bin is healthy, the product has demand, and the daily routine is easy. Then I'd choose between laying hens and quail. If chickens are legal, neighbors aren't an issue, and egg demand is strong, I'd add a small laying hen flock. Not 50 birds, not a huge setup. A small flock built around local demand. Chickens create eggs, manure, and food waste. The manure can be composted and eventually support soil systems. The eggs create a familiar product that customers already buy. If you already have gardeners buying castings, some of those same people may buy eggs. That's a natural second product. But if chickens are restricted, space is tight, or noise is a concern, I'd choose Coturnix quail instead. Coturnix quail start laying at 6 to 8 weeks. They take very little space. They can fit into a shed or protected outbuilding. Their eggs are small, distinctive, and often sell as a specialty product. They also create manure that can move into compost or soil systems. This is the first real decision point. Hens are better when the market wants familiar egg and the zoning allows them. Quail are better when space is limited, rules are tighter, or you want faster production. Both can work. The right choice depends on the backyard. Now here's what I wouldn't add early. I wouldn't start with bees unless I was ready to spend a full year learning them. Honeybees can be profitable. A strong hive can produce honey, beeswax, pollination value, nukes, pollen, and propolis. But bees aren't a casual beginner system. They require seasonal timing, mite control, swarm management, winter preparation, local knowledge, and a calm approach. A beginner can start bees early if they're committed. But if the goal is the easiest first backyard income system, bees aren't my first choice. I wouldn't start with aquaponics either. Aquaponics is impressive. Fish and plants working together is one of the most interesting backyard systems you can build. But it requires water quality, pumps, backup power, temperature control, stocking density, plant production, and a plan for selling herbs or greens. That's a lot for a first move. The fish aren't usually the main profit center. The herbs and greens are. That means you're really starting a plant production business powered by fish. That can work, but it should come after you already understand your market and your routine. I wouldn't start with rabbits unless I already had buyers. Rabbits can produce meat, manure, breeding stock, pelts, and Angora wool depending on the breed. But the biggest mistake is breeding before demand exists. Rabbits multiply on their own timeline. If the buyers aren't ready, the system gets crowded quickly. I wouldn't start with ducks unless I had a garden problem for them to solve. Ducks are excellent when they're protecting gardens from slugs, snails, beetles, and wet zone pests. Duck eggs can sell at a premium, but ducks need water management, bedding management, predator protection, and a setup that can handle moisture. They aren't hard, but they're messy if the system is poorly built. This is why the order matters. Don't add animals because they're interesting. Add them because the backyard is ready for the job they perform. That's the difference between growth and chaos. Now let's build the first backyard income stack. Start with worms. The worms turn scraps and paper into castings, live worms, and soil products. Then add hens or quail. The birds create eggs, manure, and more material for compost systems. Then add a garden. The worm castings improve the garden. The garden creates food, scraps, and potential plant sales. If ducks are added later, they protect the garden from pests. Then add rabbits if there are buyers. Rabbit manure feeds the soil side of the system. Meat, breeding stock, wool, or manure can become separate product lines. Then add bees when flowering plants, fruit trees, herbs, and forage make pollination valuable. Then add aquaponics only when you're ready to manage water and sell plants consistently. That's the expansion path I'd trust. The full stack is simple when it's built in order. Worms turn scraps into soil product. Birds turn feed into eggs. Gardens turn fertility into food. Rabbits add manure and meat when buyers are ready. Bees increase plant yields when flowers are established. Water systems come later, once the basics are stable. Notice what's happening here. The backyard isn't just adding animals, it's adding relationships. Worms support soil. Soil supports plants. Plants create scraps. Scraps feed worms. Birds create eggs and manure. Manure supports compost. Compost supports gardens. Gardens support customers. Customers reveal what to sell next. That's how a small backyard becomes a business system. The first target shouldn't be $2,000 per month. The first target should be one repeat buyer. That sounds small, but it's the most important milestone. One person buys castings and comes back. One person buys eggs weekly. One gardener asks for more soil mix. One customer asks when the next batch of quail eggs is ready. One buyer wants rabbit manure every month. Repeat buyers are the signal. They tell you the system isn't just producing, it's producing something the market wants. Once you have repeat buyers, scaling becomes safer. If I had to choose the first 90-day goal, it'd be this: build one worm bin, stabilize it, produce the first castings, sell the first small bags, find 3 local buyers, then decide whether the next move is hens or quail. That's it. Not 7 systems, not a full backyard farm, not a perfect setup. One clean loop. Because one clean loop that works is worth more than 5 half-built systems that drain time and money. And once that first loop works, the backyard starts to tell you what it needs next. If you have too many garden scraps, expand the worm bin. If customers ask for eggs, add hens. If chickens aren't legal, add quail. If the garden has slug pressure, add ducks. If gardeners keep asking for better soil, create a casting blend. If the plant side grows, consider bees. If you're ready for fish and herbs, build aquaponics. The order isn't random. It follows the pressure points. That's the whole strategy. Start cheap, start quiet, start legal, start with waste. Sell something simple, prove demand, then add the next system only when it makes the first one stronger. If I had one backyard and had to build income from scratch, that's exactly where I'd begin. Worms first, then eggs, then plants, then the rest of the stack. Not because worms are the most exciting animal on the list, but because they make every smart move after them easier. That path keeps the risk low, the learning curve manageable, and the system connected from the beginning. If this helped you think differently about where to start, subscribe to Backyard Farm Profits for more practical small farm and backyard income system. Also grab the free Backyard Income Starter Planner in the description. It'll help you choose your first system, map out your first 90 days, and track your first buyers. Grab the free Backyard Income Starter Planner in the description to map out your first 90 days. Then tell me in the comments which system you'd start with first: worms, hens, or quail. In the next video, we'll break down the best backyard animal systems that can actually start making monthly income.